Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with another knitting podcast, which is really exciting. I do have to quickly start this video with that I don't have a lot of finished objects or whips. For some reason I've been knitting very monogamously lately, so that has led to me not having a ton of things to show you as I usually would have, so I hope you still enjoy this video nonetheless. And I don't have anything else to say, so let's just get started with the first finished object, which is the one that I'm wearing. This is the Babette Bobble vest. This is currently being test knitted, so it will be released I think in October. At the end of October is what I'm planning right now. It's an Aran weight vest knit on 5mm needles, which I think is a US 8 size needle. And I knit this actually with two DK weight yarns held together, but I really would not classify them as DK weight yarn. So one of them was Long Yarns Atlantis, and then the other one was Long Yarns Merino 120 I think, which is a superwash merino yarn, and it created this garment. And the colors were super close together, so I really like how that looked. But I think if you wanted to make this pattern, it would also work with just an Aran weight yarn. So I will just stand up a little bit so you can see what it looks like. So it's an all over bubbly vest with some lace details and some seed stitch, and then I did a crochet scalloped edge that I'm also using for the buttonholes, so that is optional of course, like you don't have to put the buttons on there. And it's a little bit of a drop shoulder, not too drastic, and it has a v-neck, and then the back just looks like this. So I also made it so that the little details that are here kind of transform into the body, which I really like. This is more like narrow on the front than it is on the back, which you can see here. And I think it's a really nice vest. I had a lot of fun knitting it and designing it. I also will have a Q&A or like a knit and chat at the end of this video, where someone I think asked me a little bit about my design progress. That's probably one of my most asked questions. And I would have to say right now, just a quick thing, that I really am someone that designs on the go. So sometimes I will have a drawing up front with some kind of sketch that I'm thinking about, which I usually do have like a little bit of an idea in my head, but then it just totally changes as I'm knitting it. I really like just the process of actually knitting and designing the garment and kind of seeing what I will come up with as I go along. For some reason that really works for me, so I don't have like a clear vision in mind, and that's kind of also what happened with this vest. So that is my first and only finished object, because I knit basically this entire thing since my last knitting podcast, so I have been a little bit busy. And then I also started a new design because, you know, if you cast one off, you can start a new one. That's the rule. Lately I've just not been knitting anything that is not my own design, which I think maybe is a little bit annoying. I always used to knit other people's designs, and now I'm kind of becoming one of those YouTube channels that only knits their own designs, which was never my intention, but it's kind of how this has developed lately, so I really hope that you don't mind. And I do have some plans for the fall, and I will be making a fall knitting and sewing plans next week, so you can see what those plans are. I'm kind of still trying to decide what I want to knit that other people have designed. But yeah, this is another design, as I wanted to show you. And it's my first circular yoke sweater and colorwork garment that I have ever designed. So it was a little bit of a, not a struggle, but a learning curve for me to get started with this. But it was a lot of fun, and I do like to learn new things. That's probably one of my favorite things, is actually learning new things. I like a challenge, to be honest. So I am designing this to be released in December, so it does look a little bit Christmassy with the red going on, but that was my intention. And it's mostly some floral design. I would say all of the color work is two-stranded color work, but there are 2 rows or 3 where you're doing 3-stranded color work. So that is a little bit more annoying and fiddly. I feel like it's alright because it's only 2 or 3 rows that you have to do that. And there are quite a lot of ends to weave in. I did that last night. I think there were like 60 ends at this point in time, of course, also with joining in new balls of yarn, but it only took me an hour, just a long knitting podcast, and then they were all gone. So I would say it's not too bad. But then actually one of my favorite elements about this design is the neckline. So I went for a folded rib neckline, and this is actually 3x1 ribbing that I did with a little scalloped edge. And I just think that looks really cute, and it's very nice and cozy. And then I did a split hem, which is also my first time doing that in a design. And then this also has 3x1 ribbing. And then I did the back longer than the front, which I just think is a really nice detail. And then I've already started knitting one of the sleeves. So this is just nice stockinette in a round. I do think this is a really enjoyable knit. I love knitting colorwork, and then the rest is just stockinette. And then I will have some colorwork again near the cuff, but you will have to wait for me to finish this design to see what that looks like, because as of now, I also don't know what that's going to look like. I will design as I go along, which is how I like it. And actually, for this being my first ever colorwork yoke design and circular yoke, this has been actually a really smooth progress, because I've only had to frog the ribbing or the collar 3 times, so I had to restart 3 times before being able to start the color work. Then I had to frog some rows once, and then I did redo my chart a couple of times. But then, yeah, I didn't really have to frog anything else, which I think is really nice. And the fit is also really great. So I'm loving this one so far. And there will be a test knit call at the end of this week when this video is going live. So you will see that in my next video. I will have it linked below, because by that time you are still able to apply. But as of now, it is not available yet for test knitting. And this sweater I'm completely knitting with Drops yarn, which I always love. Drops is just really affordable for me personally to invest in, but also really accessible and affordable for you as well. And I'm using Drops Lima, which is probably one of my favorite yarns from Drops. I like it more than their new Drops Daisy, because the Drops Daisy pills a lot, so you will have to use a mohair, and this is really good on its own. All of the things that I've made in Drops Lima don't really have a lot of pilling going on, and I find it very soft as well. And it's 65% wool and 35% alpaca. So I'm using this color, I believe this one is called Wheat. And then all of the colors that are in a colorwork yoke are also by Drops, and I will have all of the color codes in the description. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this design, and I've also cast on another thing, but this is not a design that I'm currently designing. This is also in test knitting. And then once my Colorwork Sweater is finished, that is also unnamed right now. So if you do have a suggestion for a name, I would actually love it, and you can leave it in the comments, and I would really appreciate it. After that one is finished, I am very excited to cast on something else. So the only other work in progress right now that I have is, like I said, a thing that I'm also currently testing, which is the Tallulah texture cardigan. This will be released in November, so it's still going to take a little bit, and I have the tiniest bit of progress, because I only cast this on yesterday, and this is just the back neck, and yeah, tiniest bit of progress. So I'm sorry, I know that's a little bit boring, but that's just the reality. Like I said, I've been knitting very monogamously lately. I don't know what's going on with me. But I'm knitting this with Concept by Katia Cotton Merino in a really lovely color. This is the color number 138, and it's kind of a brown pink color. This is a blown yarn, and it's really beautiful. And I think this is going to make a really nice Tallulah texture cardigan, because to be honest, I don't love my original yarn that I used, because I knit that one in Drops Charisma, which is a superwash yarn, and I just feel like it's very squishy, but not in the right kind of way. So I think this will be really nice, and then I will probably donate or sell the other Tallulah cardigan that I have, because I don't need 2 samples, since I think they are a little bit close in color. When I'm going to make finished object photos, they are going to look quite similar, but I was just really drawn to this color, so here we are. And this yarn is actually kindly gifted to me by Katia, so I reached out to them asking if they wanted to sponsor this design just for me. So the test knitters sadly are not sponsored. Maybe one day I will be able to have some kind of test knit that is sponsored, but this one is just sponsored for me, which is still really nice and helpful and kind of them. But I do really love this yarn, and this is what I would have purchased myself if I weren't sponsored. So this is something that I truly stand behind. I have gotten more requests for sponsorships and stuff, but I only ever sponsor with things where I really 100% love the company. For example, there was also a company, Knit Pro, that reached out to me, and they wanted to give me some knitting needles, which I do really like. I actually only knit with Knit Pro their needles, and I always use either the Symphony needles or their ginger needles. But I really prefer the ginger needles if you're looking for nice wooden needles where the number or the size of the needle doesn't go away over time. Then the Knit Pro Ginger is the answer, because actually the Knit Pro Symphony, those needles actually have the number or the needle size written on the wooden part of the needle, so it goes away very quickly. Like all of my needles that I have that are Symphony needles, I don't know what size they are, and it's just a guessing game. And I know you have those little tools that you can use to see what size they are, but like many, I don't really like using those. So the Knit Pro Ginger needles have the size on there, like here you can see that this is a 4mm needle. And that's just really nice. And that's also not sponsored. I'm just saying that if you're looking for something nice, then that's something you can use. But like I said, I decline a collaboration if I don't like the product 100%. So those were already all of my works in progress and my finished objects. I do have one lingering work in progress that I would love to get back to, which is a pair of socks. I always say this, but I'm just not a huge sock knitter. But I do feel like knitting socks again now that the colder weather is hopefully on its way. I'm not a big winter or summer person actually. I just love fall and winter. And it's this pair of socks. This is kind of like my own little pattern. It's not going to be a pattern, it's just something that I'm winging. Maybe I could write down what I'm doing. I probably will make a Ravelry page or something so you can follow along. But it's super simple, and there are probably patterns out there that have this stitch pattern, but it's just some little purl bumps every now and then and a little picot edge and then a twisted heel flap and gusset. Just really nice and basic. And I'm knitting this in drop snort on 2.5mm needles, and I have not touched this in a very long time and I want to get back to it. And then the other thing that I would really like to knit is, like I said, when my Colorwork sweater is finished, which hopefully will be soon, I'm going to cast on a new design which will be a cardigan, probably a raglan cardigan with some type of color, and I think it's going to be really cute. And I'm doing green for the first time, which is really fun, and I do really like this color of green, but it's not just something that I've worn a lot, so I thought I would try something new. So I'm going to be knitting this in Drops Air in the color 47, held together with Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the color 32. And these actually have different color names on the website, but I feel like in real life they are quite a good match. Of course, the Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk, which is this one, is much darker, but I feel like when you hold them together, it will be okay. I have not swatched with this yet, so I still also have to figure out what needle size I will be knitting this cardigan with. But right now I'm hoping this will be a nice fabric on 5mm needles, maybe 5.5. I don't want to go up to a 6 because I prefer to design things that are 4 or 5mm needles. That's just personal preference for some reason. So yeah, that's going to be really exciting, but you will not see that until my next knitting podcast. But I just wanted to share the yarn because I'm really excited by it. And then I think today I will cast on something else because I also really want to design a pair of gloves with a hat set. I think that will be really fun. So maybe I'm thinking this hand-dyed yarn for a hat and then this regular yarn for some gloves, but I'm not sure yet because I feel like maybe a matching set would make more sense. So this is the Life in the Long Grass singles hand-dyed yarn in the color Sienna Pink, which I probably have shown before quite a lot of times, but I think I'm finally ready to get into it. And then this is some Drops Laura with Drops Schizo, and I believe this color is called Strawberry Pink. I think this mohair actually also really suits the hand-dyed yarn very nicely, but I only have one of the mohair, so I feel like it wouldn't be enough. So I might have to go to the local store to see if I can get more mohair, or I would have to order it online. I have not decided yet. Also let me know what you would think would look nice, or if I should get something else. But this is what works best right now from my yarn stash. Most of my yarn stash I feel like is for tops and sweaters that I'm going to be designing next year, so they're all kind of summery, especially very light in color. And I'm kind of trying to gravitate more towards wintry and fall colors, like this vest and the green cardigan. Then I do have some sewing finished objects as well. So the first one was the Saturday skirt by Cayden Naughton that I'm currently testing for her, and actually it has been released right now, so it's super fun. I think this is such a perfect skirt pattern, and I'm not saying that because I tested it for her, it just really is. It's something that you can wear in any season and at any time of the year, and you can dress it up, you can dress it down. It's just so versatile, and that's really why I love it. So it, like I said, it's called the Saturday skirt, and it looks like this. So I made it in this lilac Indian cotton fabric, so this one is probably more summery because it's very lightweight and also see-through. And I really love the curved details that it has in the front. So this one was View A, and it is designed as a maxi skirt, or like it has to go up to your ankles, but I actually shorten it by 6 centimeters. Also because I'm 3 inches shorter than she is. So she's 5'9", which is 175 centimeters, and then I'm 5'6", which is 168 centimeters. And I'm quite happy with that decision. And then I made this in the size 1, which is not the smallest size. So I'm happy to report that. So I did kind of request to her to have a size smaller than I am. Like I always talk about with size inclusivity, is that it's not normal for me to be the smallest size, because I know that there will always be someone that is smaller than me, since I am 5'6". So that's really important to me, and I'm very happy that she's very size inclusive also on the upper end of the sizing scale. And this was my first time sewing a lap zipper, which was a really fun experience. And it's basically just a zipper that looks like this, so it's kind of hidden behind this piece of fabric, and then it has a button closure as well, but you can also do a hook and eye here. So I'm super happy with how this skirt turned out, and I actually did make another version, which probably is my last summer make of the year, which is made in a really nice blue cotton fabric by Katia, which was also kindly gifted to me. And then I also made a matching top. So I made the Emma top by Silver Saga Patterns, which I really love, and I just cropped it quite a lot to make it really short so that it would fit nicely with the Saturday skirt. And then I did some lace on the front of the Saturday skirt and a little bow on the Emma top. And sadly, like you see, I don't have it to show you right now because I put it in a wash this morning, which was a little bit silly of me, so I apologize for that. But I will have some pictures on the screen because it's a really cute set, and I'm planning to make a lot more Saturday skirts because I just picture it with some gingham fabric or like a darker linen fabric. I think any type of fabric honestly would look really cute with this pattern. Also a denim fabric. There are also views where this is not gathered, so for example a corduroy fabric would suit it a lot better because I would not gather a heavy fabric like that, but it's just lovely and you need it, like I said. So those three things were the only things that I've sewn since my last knitting podcast. And then I have some books that I've read. And I read them all on my Kindle besides one of them. But yeah, I don't really feel like I need to grab it because I will just insert a picture. So the first book that I read was called Belladonna by Adeline Grace. And this one took me a little bit to get into. So I kept putting it down and not really feeling gravitated or excited by it to get back to reading it, but it actually ended up being a super fun book, and it's kind of a gothic romantasy, so it's romance fantasy combined, but in a very gothic and paranormal kind of way, and it's just a super fun book, and I would really recommend that one. I think I rated it like 4 or 5 stars. Then I also read Summer Romance by Annabelle Monogamy, I think is how you pronounce her name, but I really did not love that book. It was just not very exciting. The characters didn't really speak to me in a way, and it was still a quick read, somewhat, even though it took me a very long time because I just was not excited by it at all. It just didn't really do anything for me. That's kind of how I would describe it. Right now, if I would have to tell you what happened in the book, I don't think I would be able to say what happened in the book. It's just, I know it happens in a small town, and then I don't know anything else. I don't know the characters, I don't remember. There were dogs. And that was cute. And a lot of children. And I remember thinking that the children were very annoying. But then I read another book where there were also children. And that book was actually really cute. So I think it just really depends how it's written. I'm not a huge lover of children, I would have to say. So do keep that in mind. But the next book that I read that had the children in it was The Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Oh, I forgot the name of the writer, but I will put it on the screen for sure. And that one was so much fun. I just loved the magic in it. There was also some romance. I would have to say that the romance part was not my favorite. There was also a spy scene that for me it felt like it didn't really have to be there. I think if they removed it from the book, it would have been a perfect young adult book, but they had to put it in there for some reason, I don't know. But still, I thought it was a really nice book, and like I said, especially the magic part and the witches were just really fun. And I definitely want to read more books with witches in them because I think I've kind of found my genre. I think I am more of a fantasy person than a romance person. That's like all the genres that I've read so far. I know a lot of people also read, of course, like thrillers and sci-fi and those types of things, but honestly, when I read the synopsis on the back of a book, it's usually the fantasy and the romance book that just sound a little bit more exciting than like a sci-fi book or a thriller. Just my personal preference, I think, but I'm still figuring it out a little bit as I go along. And yeah, I think those are all of the books and sewing and knitting that I've done. I've not done any crochet since my last podcast, so I don't have anything to update you about there. But I do have, like I said, a few questions to enter in the knitting chat, which I will go into now. So I'm gonna grab my Colorwork sweater and knit on the sleeve. So the first question that I was asked is, are you going to make a video with fall inspiration patterns? And I definitely will. I am first going to talk about my own fall knitting and sewing plans, but then I do want to make just like a regular pattern video that I do every once in a while. But I think for now, I want to, yeah, like I said, just figure out what I want to make for myself. And I think that will still be like inspirational in some way, because you will still be able to see patterns and sewing patterns that I personally would really like to make. And then the next question that someone asked is, how much time does it usually take you to design a garment? And I would say that usually it's about a month for me to design a garment from start to finish. Of course, that's also because knitting just takes a lot of time, so it's not something that you can just quickly do. So I think a month is very reasonable, and within that time, I would say generally I'm also able to get it tech edited and get started on the test knit. But that definitely also means that I don't design a garment every single month to be able to release it. I design a little bit slower than that. Of course, I also sometimes like to knit other people their patterns, or I take a little bit of a break, or I don't have as much inspiration. I think that's all very natural. Then someone asked me, where do you find inspiration? Honestly, I find the most inspiration by going to vintage stores that I often talk about and just seeing the hand knit garments that people have made like 50 years ago. I just think that's incredible and super inspiring. And I also love vintage knitting books and vintage knitting patterns that I often like to browse on Etsy. Sometimes I also look on like Etsy shops that have vintage clothing and look at their knitwear. I just think that's very inspirational. But then I also love looking on Pinterest to see stitch patterns that people have shared or colorwork things. But then also things from other crafts. So sometimes I will take inspiration from the silhouette of a sewing pattern, and the same kind of applies to the textile aspect of a garment. So sometimes like quilting can be very textured, or embroidery on clothing I think is very inspirational. So I think inspiration can be found anywhere. Then that same person asked me, what are the steps you follow personally to design a garment? I think there are definitely steps that I follow towards designing a garment, but those steps are definitely not steps that I take consciously. So I would say the most logical step to design a garment is to first have the idea and then make a swatch and test out like different yarns or stitch patterns, the gauge. I think that's how most people design, but like I said before, that's not really how I design things. I kind of tend to have an idea, and then I know approximately what needle size and yarn that I want to use, and then I will just cast on and see what the gauge is and then go from there. And sometimes I will frog, but usually I don't have to frog and I just go with the flow. That's kind of my design process. But I think, like I said, the most logical is to take it step by step. And actually recently I've also started using spreadsheets. So usually, or as I've done now in the past, I do all of the math by hand. So I would grade each size separately and do it all on my calculator, which was very time consuming. But then I found out that you can do it with spreadsheets. So I wanted to look into that, and I found a really helpful blog post that I will definitely link below because it really helped me. And that's how I was able to grade this sweater, which was really nice and helpful, and it just saved me a lot of time. So I would really recommend. Then someone asked me, how did you start writing and selling your own patterns and how difficult it is? I do have a complete video on YouTube on how I kind of started selling knitting patterns, so I will also link that below because I think this person maybe is not aware that I've made that video, although I don't really remember what information I shared in that video because I'm super forgetful. So I don't think there's necessarily a way on how I started writing and selling them because I kind of just started. I just started writing it, found a tech editor and posted it on Ravelry. There's not much to it. How difficult it is? I would say it's not difficult. I do think there's a lot of math involved, and that's definitely not for everyone. I definitely like the math aspect. I really like the technical side of making knitting patterns, but that's something that also comes with it, so it's not just fun designing and knitting all the time. Probably the knitting is maybe my least favorite, which I know is strange. One thing for me that I didn't think about when I was starting to design knitting patterns is actually how much time you're gonna end up just sitting and knitting, which I know that sounds really nice, but when you're actually trying to finish a garment, sometimes you will have to sit for 4 days on end just trying to finish the thing. And I think that was probably something that I didn't really expect. I think usually people that just knit for fun, they will just knit for a little bit here and there. Sometimes you may have a day in the weekend where you knit for like 8 hours straight, which is kind of unhealthy, by the way. But not like this. So I really, sometimes my work is just sitting and knitting. which is nice, but I also like to do other things, and I think it's also healthy to do other things. So that is something that I didn't expect and that I think is maybe a little bit more difficult. And then I also probably didn't expect that you have to sell a lot of knitting patterns to be able to break even. I think for most of my patterns I am starting to break even, but that definitely took quite a bit of time, and I think that will depend on every person. It's going to depend on a lot of factors, but that's just something that I think is maybe a more difficult aspect. I think to be able to make a living off of knitting patterns, you have to sell a lot, and that may not be possible for everyone. So the next question also kind of talks about this, because it's, as an aspiring designer, I'd love to know how you track effort, so the hours versus reward, the income. And I definitely don't do that. I don't look at how much hours I've spent on a knitting pattern and how much then I need to break even. But I did talk about this in my selling knitting patterns video. So if you want to know more about that, like I said, it will also be linked down below. Because right now I don't look at that. I just look at the actual money that I spent on the tag editing and then the yarn. And then if I sell enough patterns, that's my break even point. But of course, if you really want to make it very profitable, then you do have to look at all of the hours that you've spend and then see if it's actually rewarding for your income. Just because in my personal experience, breaking even from the tag editing and the yarn that you've spent is already a challenge enough. And then all of the time that you've spent, I think that comes later. So right now, I definitely think for me, it's more of a side hustle / hobby kind of thing that I'm doing, and not like an actual functioning business. But it definitely can become that. But I think it also just needs a lot of time and nurturing. And I think a lot of people maybe are not aware of that when they start designing knitting patterns. I definitely think social media just portrays it in a very different light. That it's just, like I said, like, oh, you just get to knit all the time and design things and it's really fun. But it's a lot of math and you have to sew a lot and it's a lot of hard work, I think. But that's just my personal experience. And like I always say, that doesn't mean that that will be your experience as well. So I think those are all of the questions that I had and that I wanted to answer in this video. So I really hope that you enjoyed that. And recently I've actually gotten quite a bit of comments from people that said I have somewhat of a relaxing voice to listen to. So I'm kind of thinking, honestly, to maybe start a ASMR channel, but with like knitting and books and sewing things. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that, but I would think personally that it would be just such a cozy little space on the internet. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. I thought about maybe just getting started on it, but I do just want to see if people would be interested in that. So if you would be interested in that, then please do let me know also in the comments. And then maybe I will start that one day, because I think it would be a lot of fun. Definitely more work for myself, you know, to have another YouTube channel, but also a lot of fun. And there aren't a lot of knitting channels that combine ASMR, or the other way around. I've looked, but I've not found them. So maybe I should make a change there. And before ending this video, I did quickly wanted to say a big thank you to everyone that commented on my last video, where I kind of shared a little bit about my personal experience with body shaming and skinny shaming. And I really appreciate all of the sweet comments that I got and people sharing their experience with that. And the words of encouragement. It definitely did not go unnoticed. I know sometimes I don't respond to comments as quickly as I want to, but do know that I read every one of them and I really appreciate that. And I love that this is such a nice and positive space for everyone to feel comfortable enough to share their personal experience, and it definitely lifted me up. So yeah, just a big thank you for that. And I think for now that it was all that I wanted to share in this knitting podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed and that you got some inspiration from it. For now, I wish you all a very happy day, happy knitting, and I will hopefully see you in my next video, which will be the fall knitting and sewing plans video. So for now, I wish you all a very happy day. Bye bye!